Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Beckwith, and in today's video we're going to be looking at an EEG of a 23-year-old right-handed male with primary generalized epilepsy. Now if you're unfamiliar with EEG, generalized means that it affects the whole brain compared to focal, meaning it just affects one specific focal part of the brain. So this person, they're on a medication called Topamax. That's an anti-epileptic drug that you're gonna wanna know and be able to mark down for the doctor. So let's get into the actual EEG recording and look at what we're seeing. So the first thing I look at when doing an EEG is look at the background. So right now, the patient's eyes are closed. They seem to be relaxed enough. There's a little bit of muscle here around the T3 area. But if you're really concerned about that, you can just reduce the artifact with our artifact reduction button, but it doesn't seem to be completely overwhelming, so we can just leave it. Now, the first thing to do when looking at an EEG is to observe the background, the posterior dominant rhythm, or the PDR. To check that, you go to the electrodes of the O's, O2, and also O1, and see if they are symmetric. We have to count how many waves per second. Now let's make this real simple. Just count waves per second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now if we count the other side, O1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11 hertz PDR on both sides. So it's symmetric. We have to check if it's reactive. If it changes with eye opening and closure, we're going to check on that later. But we do know it's symmetric, and it seems to be continuous. If we check the EEG trends, we can see even more information before we actually scroll through the EEG waves. So we just counted an 11 hertz PDR. Now, if we look at the EEG trends, this is the left side of the brain, this is the right side of the brain, split it up into half and half. Kind of like a double banana montage that we're looking at, only in trends form. So if we see this red line right here, 10 hertz is here, 11 hertz is here. Why is there this dark red line at 11 hertz? What could this be, guys? What is the mystery of this dark red line at 11 hertz? Well, guys, this is showing that the person has a 11 hertz posterior dominant rhythm. Now, on the asymmetry side, you're seeing little splotches, light splotches of red and blue, which essentially means it's symmetric. If you're seeing dark colors and it's just one color continuously throughout the whole thing, then you might be looking into, there might be some asymmetry here. But you can see the right side of the brain, the left side of the brain, they look pretty much symmetric. If you want to see the amplitude, we have the left is the blue line, the right is the red line, and this shows an average of the amplitude at the bottom areas of the EEG, the lowest amplitude and average, and they're pretty much overlapping lines, so that's pretty symmetric, and an average of the amplitude at the highest margins where the red and blue line are essentially overlapping. So amplitude symmetric, they are symmetric in frequency as well, and we have a nice 11 hertz posterior dominant rhythm. Now, I don't see any seizures on the trends, so we can close this and actually scroll through the EEG waves now. See, we got a lot of information just by looking at the first page of EEG and the trends. Now, my friends, it's time to scroll through the EEG and see if we can find out anything interesting. Now, just by scrolling a couple seconds, we find something interesting. This stands out from the background. This is the background, the normal background right here. But right here, we have some, let's change the sensitivity, make it a little bit lower so we can see what's going on. You see these little spikes here. Now these aren't artifact, they aren't coming from a source that isn't the brain. This is actually coming from the brain, these little spiky things here. And if we look at what electrode sites are they coming from, it seems to be coming from the front of the brain. Spike and wave. Pretty interesting finding, guys. But with all findings on EEG, we want to see if we can, reproduce the finding. And if you just scroll a little bit longer, you can see essentially the same spike and slow wave discharges. Now this is true epileptic discharges, which makes sense to be seeing in someone who has already been diagnosed with primary generalized epilepsy. Now, my friends, so we see over here the posterior dominant rhythm. You see the 10 to 11 waves in the back of the head. It's clearly showing. Well, that's because the patient's eyes are closed, eyes closed. But right here, what is this weird thing here? And why does the posterior dominant rhythm essentially disappear, guys? What could be causing this? Tell me in the comments. And what are these things right here? Well, my friends, the answer is the patient open their eyes open. So when the patient opens their eyes, the posterior dominant rhythm goes away, and when they close their eyes, the posterior dominant rhythm right here reappears. So when they open their eyes right here, you can see in the frontal leads the little eye movements, and then you can see a blink right here, blink right here, blink right here, blink right here. And while the eyes are open, you can't see the posterior dominant rhythm. Now that shows us that their PDR is reactive, which is a normal finding in an EEG. But they keep having these spike and wave discharges, which are predominantly in the frontal region. There's more eye blinks for you. There's another more spike and wave discharges. Scrolling through the whole EEG. Now, these are not seizures, guys. These are actually called interictal discharges that happen between seizures. Now, the EEG tech, during these spike and wave discharges, they test the patient's awareness during it. They ask them maybe a code word, tell them to remember like blue dog, red truck, something like that, and test their consciousness during these discharges. Now, during the history, let's see what they say in the history. This is essentially the whole EEG, and it doesn't really change much from there, but let's look at the doctor's history, the full history, to see what the doctor thought of the EEG, so we can wrap up. So 23-year-old, primary generalized epilepsy and wakefulness. The background shows an 11.5 hertz posterior dominant rhythm, which we all talked about with posterior slow waves of youth. I need to get better at recognizing that specifically, something I can work on. It says in relaxed wakefulness, there are brief bursts of frontally predominant 3 to 5 hertz, so 3 to 5 waves per second, spike and wave. Instead of in, he meant and. Spike and wave activity with bursts, typically 1.8 seconds in duration. That's pretty damn specific. Thanks, Doc. And most are under 2 seconds and none exceed 3 seconds in duration. Hyperventilation seems to accentuate these bursts. See, that's something we do. We make our patients hyperventilate if they don't have any history of heart attack, stroke, high blood pressure, breathing problems. We'll have them hyperventilate to see if it can bring out seizure activity while they're on the EEG. And also it says they test for responsiveness, like I was talking about, a code word. But it says that the bursts are so brief that it's not possible to really give someone a code word during the burst and then have them answer it afterwards. So they at least tried to test responsiveness, but if there's longer bursts of activity, it'll be a little bit easier to test responsiveness. And they said there's no deficits in recall identified during the burst, so the person's aware, they're with it during these spike and wave interictal bursts that happen between seizures. And it says on rare occasions, patient becomes drowsy, bursts a little bit more maximum in the right frontal region. And I didn't really see the photic stimulation part. Maybe they did that on a different part, but it also notes that the spike and wave activity is not accentuated by the flashing light. So that is pretty much it, guys. If you want to see me review more EEGs, go through the records, see what I think, see what the doctor thinks, and if this was exciting to you guys, hit the like button. I really appreciate it. Comment down below what kind of EEGs should I show next, and I'll see you all on the next video.